A soldier escorting a casket gets stopped by airport security. What happened next left the entire terminal frozen in silence. People didn't notice him at first. He stepped off Flight 216 from Tucson into the heart of Hartsfield, Jackson, like a shadow that didn't ask for attention. Black jacket, crisp white gloves, clean hat, low back straight. His name was Dorian Ellison, and he wasn't here for comfort. He wasn't here for vacation. He was here to escort a body, one of his own, a soldier who didn't make it back home on his own 2 feet. The casket moved gently beneath his hands as it came down the ramp, flag folded tight across the top. No scratches, no dirt, just the stars and stripes like it was supposed to be. Dorian walked alongside it like the world around him didn't exist. That was the training, that was the oath. You protect the honor of the fallen, like your life depends on it, even when no one's watching, especially then. He had done this before, but it didn't get easier. Every name plate different, every mother on the other end holding a different kind of pain. This one, Staff Sergeant Lennox Rayford, 29 years old, 2 kids in Fresno, took a hit that wasn't meant for him. Dorian didn't know him personally, but he knew of him, the kind of man who let others eat first, covered for his team, took the night watch even when he didn't have to, and now he was coming home. Dorian's steps were precise, not showy, not stiff, just steady like his boots were stitched to the floor. People started to look, not a lot, but enough. A couple sitting by a window lowered their coffee cups. A boy with headphones halfway out of his ears blinked and leaned forward. The silence wasn't loud, but it was deep. A TSA agent by the corner leaned in to whisper to a colleague, eyes flicking toward the casket. That's a tomb guard, right? One of the Arlington guys. The other one just nodded, watching, but not everyone understood what they were seeing. As Dorian reached the bottom of the jet bridge, something shifted, not in him but around him. A junior security officer, clipboard in hand, maybe mid-20s, rushed over from the side hallway. "Excuse me, sir," she called out. Dorian didn't stop. She jogged to keep up. "Sir, I need to see your access credentials." He didn't blink. He didn't turn. His eyes never left the casket. "Ma'am, I'm currently in the process of escorting a fallen soldier to ground transport. I am not to be delayed." There was no attitude, no aggression, just fact. But she wasn't convinced. "I understand that, but this area is restricted. I wasn't informed of any ceremony or procession today. If you don't have clearance, I need to radio this in now." People were really looking. Dorian stopped, not because he wanted to, because he had to. His grip tightened ever so slightly on the handle at the end of the casket's platform. You could almost hear the tension humming in the air between them. His voice was low but solid. "Ma'am, step aside, please." The officer hesitated. She glanced at the casket, then back at him. "I'm just following protocol. If I let you through without clearance and something happens." Behind her, an older man in a Delta maintenance vest started approaching slowly, hands slightly up, like he didn't want to startle anyone. He looked like he'd seen something like this before. "Hey, maybe let's just call a supervisor," he said gently, but she shook her head. "I am the supervisor on this concourse today," she said, more defensive now. People were standing still, no phones out, just watching, and through it all Dorian didn't flinch, not once, not even when the officer stepped closer and reached toward the casket with her hand, like she was going to inspect it. That's when it happened. From across the concourse a voice called out, not loud, but full of urgency, "Don't touch that flag." But before the officer could respond, the woman behind the voice was already striding toward them with eyes that told a story Dorian hadn't heard. Yet her name tag said Tasha Pennington. But you didn't need to see it to know. She was the kind of woman who didn't waste words. Late 40s, pressed navy blouse, flat shoes worn from years of standing, In the same spot she wasn't running but. She wasn't strolling either every step. She took came with purpose Tasha had. Worked this airport for 23 years she'd seen celebrities lose their minds over delayed flights she'd seen young men cry at the gate before shipping out but this was something else as she approached she didn't even look at the officer her eyes were locked on the casket on the flag. Step back she said calm but direct you. Don't touch that the officer straightened ma'am I was just following. Pro I said step back Tasha repeated you. Can write me up if you want but that man is not to be stopped and you sure as hell don't lay hands on that flag. Dorian hadn't moved still standing still, holding the platform but his eyes flicked toward her now shampoo just briefly enough to see the pin on her collar a small gold cross tucked just beneath her badge. Tasha turned toward him and for the first time since stepping off the plane Dorian's face softened. My father did 3 tours in Nam she said quietly used to tell me stories about the honor guard said they were the reason some of his friends came home with dignity. Dorian gave the slightest nod nothing more. I saw your badge number when you came through the terminal she added didn't say anything then but when I saw her trying to stop you. Tasha paused and looked at the younger officer who now seemed unsure of everything. I wasn't going to let that happen. The crowd had grown maybe 15-20 people now, nobody moving, nobody talking. Just watching. A teenage boy near the back whispered, "Is he a soldier?" An older man beside him, maybe in his 60s, answered without looking away, "Not just a soldier, that's a tomb guard Arlington." The words carried weight, the air shifted. The junior officer swallowed hard. I didn't realize, I thought this was just cargo protocol. Tasha turned to her firm. But not unkind, that's not cargo, that's someone's son, someone's dad maybe, and that man is walking him home for the first time. The officer seemed to really look at the casket. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I'm sorry. Dorian didn't speak. He didn't need to then. Quietly he took one small step forward and continued his walk and nobody got in his way. Tasha fell in beside him not because she had to because it felt right. I'll walk with you till the transfer van she said, just in case someone else forgets what that uniform means. They didn't talk much as they moved through the hallway. Every so often someone on the side would stop walking, remove a hat, lower their head. Not everyone but enough. A security guard near a vending machine stood and saluted. Dorian didn't acknowledge them. That wasn't his job. His eyes stayed forward, focused, locked, but he felt it. The respect, the silence, the weight. It didn't matter if they knew the soldier's name or what unit he served in or where the IED exploded. What mattered was that he mattered. Tasha stopped at the sliding glass doors that led to the loading area. The transfer vehicle was waiting back, doors open, lined with white padding and black straps. Dorian turned to her. You didn't have to do that, I know, she said. But it was the right thing. He gave the smallest tilt of his chin, not quite a nod. She took a breath. You ever get tired of doing this? Dorian paused. No, he said. Why not? He looked down at the flag, then back at her. Because every time I do it means someone else doesn't have to. But just as he prepared to lift the casket onto the transport bed, someone new approached, someone who hadn't said a word but had been watching the whole time. The man was tall, broad in the shoulders, mid-50s, blazer over jeans, aviator sunglasses still on, like he hadn't adjusted to being indoors yet. His ID badge swung slightly as he moved. Federal Security Director was printed beneath his name. Bryce Hanford. He didn't come storming in. He came with the calm authority of someone used to making problems disappear, but he wasn't looking for a problem right now. He was trying to make sense of what had almost happened. Who stopped this procession? He asked, not barking but loud enough for everyone within earshot to freeze. The young officer raised her hand slightly. It was Me sir, he turned to her. What's your name? Officer Alyssa Gentry, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Gentry, tell me what protocol you were following that called for physically inspecting a military escort with a flag draped casket. She hesitated. I didn't recognize the clearance, sir. I didn't realize who he was. I thought you thought wrong, he said, still composed but now sharp. We brief on escort protocol every 3 months. You should have known, and if you didn't know, you should have asked. Tasha stepped forward before Gentry could reply. She didn't mean harm, she said. She just didn't know better. Hanford glanced at Tasha. He seemed to know her, probably crossed paths more than once in this airport. I get that, but that doesn't excuse disrespect, intentional or not. You don't touch the flag, period. You don't hold up the honor guard. You don't question a man who's doing something you'll never have to. Gentry nodded quietly. I understand, sir. Hanford turned to Dorian. I owe you an apology on behalf of the airport and TSA. This shouldn't have happened. Dorian's voice was calm but direct. It's not about me, it's about who I'm walking with. Hanford gave a respectful nod. Understood. They stood in silence for a few seconds, the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. Tasha finally broke it. We good now? Hanford sighed, then glanced at the transfer van. We're good. Dorian turned back to the casket, slid his gloved hands underneath the rails, and, with the same care he started with, gently lifted it onto the transport platform. No sudden moves, no sound except for the click of the locking straps. A man waiting by the driver's side, a Vietnam-era vet, judging by the patches on his windbreaker, snapped to attention and saluted. Nobody asked him to, he just did. A moment passed and Tasha looked toward Dorian. One last time. I've worked here more than 2 decades, she said. Seen a lot of people pass through, but I've never seen anyone carry themselves the way you do. Dorian didn't smile, but something softened in his posture. It's not for show, he said. It's for the fallen. She nodded, and that was it. He climbed into the passenger seat of the van, not taking his eyes off the casket. Even as the doors closed, no music, no fanfare, just the sound of the van pulling away through the back gate, disappearing into the humid afternoon. But the story didn't end there, because one man in that crowd had recorded what happened, not for clicks, not for likes, but because he wanted to remember what respect looked like. The video wasn't flashy, it didn't have music or filters, just a single shaky shot from a cell phone recorded by Jerome Thacker, a truck driver from Shreveport who'd been sitting near gate C42 with a breakfast burrito in one hand when the scene started to unfold. He hadn't planned on filming anything. In fact, he hated that people always had their phones out, but something about the way Dorian walked, silent, strong, focused, made him press record. Jerome posted the 90-second clip to his Facebook that night with a simple caption: Tomb guard stopped by airport security while escorting fallen soldier. Man didn't even blink, carried that casket like he was walking on sacred ground. He went to bed with maybe 7 likes. By morning it had over 2 million views. People in the comments weren't just reacting, they were telling stories. Stories about fathers who never came home, about brothers who did but never came back, the same about cousins who stood in the rain for hours just to salute someone they'd barely known. One comment near the top read, "My brother served in the 3rd Infantry," he said. The tomb guards are the reason people still believe in honor. Another, "That woman in the Navy shirt, that's Tasha. She's been at the Delta desk in Atlanta forever. She helped me find my mother's bag when it got lost. Of course she stepped in." And one more, "That guard didn't flinch, not once. God bless him." Tasha hadn't seen the video yet. She was too busy working another double shift and helping reroute flights after a sudden thunderstorm delayed the morning boardings, but someone showed it to her in the break room that afternoon. She Watched it without blinking. She watched herself walk into frame and say, "Don't touch that flag." She watched Dorian stand tall without ever looking around for help, and then she heard a voice in the background, barely audible over the low crowd chatter. It was a woman's voice. "Do you even know who he is?" No one could tell exactly who said it, but it echoed through the video like a stone tossed in still water. Later that evening, Dorian sat on the edge of a motel bed in Mon Georgia clean room, 2 twin beds. Remote on the dresser. He'd dropped the casket off at the local funeral home a few hours earlier. Tomorrow he'd attend the memorial service. Standing in the back like he always did, he didn't check his phone until after his boots were off. One missed call from Captain Riley, 3 texts from guys on base, and then a link. He clicked it. There he was on screen. That walk, that moment, that voice, Tasha's. He watched it in silence, then he watched it again. He didn't care about going viral. He didn't want attention. That wasn't why he wore the gloves or the hat or walked with measured steps. He did it because Staff Sergeant Rafford had done his part, and now it was Dorian's turn to carry him home. Still, something about that clip stuck with him, not because people noticed him, but because they noticed the act, the respect, the fact that there are things you don't question, things you don't interrupt. He turned off his phone and stared at the blank wall across from him. This was never supposed to be about going viral, but maybe it was good that people saw it. But the video hadn't just reached the people at home, it had made its way to someone else, someone who had been quietly grieving hundreds of miles away in a modest, sun-worn house outside Fresno. Janelle Rayford sat on the edge of her living room couch with her hands in her lap and her phone resting screen up beside her. It had buzzed 7 times in the last half hour. Family, friends, old neighbors, they were all sending her the same link. At first she didn't want to open it. She'd spent the last week swimming through grief, funeral arrangements, military paperwork, the impossible job of explaining to 2 little boys that their father wouldn't be coming home. But curiosity got the better of her when she finally pressed play. Her eyes locked onto the screen. The camera shook, but she could still make him out, the man in uniform, the way he walked beside the casket, the tension, the pause, the woman stepping in to stop it all. She saw the argument, then the silence, then the walk. She cried, but not like she had in the days before. This wasn't the raw, messy kind of crying that broke out when the knock came at the door or when she first saw Lennox's uniform folded in a box. No, this was quieter, slower. She watched Dorian like she'd known him for years. She didn't know his name yet, but the way he moved, the way he protected her husband's memory even without knowing his story, it hit different. Her oldest son, Brelon, came into the room mid-video dragging his backpack behind him. "Mom, what's that?" She wiped her eyes quickly. "It's a video. Someone filmed the man bringing Daddy home." Brelon walked over and stood beside her, his brows pulled together the way his father's used to. "Is that him?" "No," she said, pointing to the man in uniform. "That's someone else. That's the guard." Brelon squinted. "He looks serious." "He's supposed to," she said. "That's part of his job." "Is he sad?" "I think so," she said softly, "but he's not allowed to show it." Brelon leaned on her shoulder and together they watched the rest of the clip. Janelle whispered almost to herself, "He made sure your daddy came home the right way." Brelon didn't say anything, but when the video ended he looked up at her. "Can I meet him someday?" She didn't answer right away. Back at the airport, Tasha sat on the bench outside the staff entrance with a half-eaten granola bar in one hand and her phone in the other. She was watching the video again, but her mind wasn't on the screen. It was somewhere else, 25 years back, maybe more. She remembered her dad, Royce Pennington, standing in the living room in his old Army tee, pointing at the TV during a Memorial Day ceremony. "You see those boys in the white gloves?" he asked her. She was only 7 then. "Yeah, they don't blink, they don't break, they guard the tomb 24 hours a day, rain or shine. Why? Because some folks gave everything, and it's our job to remember." She didn't get it at the time, but now she did. Her dad had passed in 2011, stroke quiet, peaceful, but she always remembered the way he spoke about honor like it was something physical, something you could hold in your hand or pass down like a family recipe. That day with Dorian wasn't about being a hero or going viral. It was about stepping in when someone forgets what respect looks like. She tucked her phone away and stood up to head back inside. As she opened the door, a passing pilot she didn't recognize gave her a quiet nod and said, "Saw the video, you did right." She didn't reply, just gave a small smile and kept walking. But the story wasn't finished, not yet. Because someone had a message for Dorian Ellison, and they weren't going to rest until he heard it. 2 days later, Dorian returned to the same airport, same boots, same uniform, same silence. This time he wasn't escorting a body, he was scheduled to fly back to DC, back to the 3rd Infantry Base, back to the structure and silence of Arlington. But something about this trip felt different. The weight was still there, just in a different shape. As he passed through the concourse, a few people stopped what they were doing. One woman near the news stand blinked, leaned toward her friend and whispered, "That's him, that's the one from the video." Dorian kept walking. He wasn't interested in attention, he wasn't trying to become a symbol, he just wanted to get back to the post, back to the tomb, back to where silence means something sacred. But when he reached gate D17, something unexpected happened. A Delta employee walked briskly toward him. She looked flustered, but in a hopeful way, like she was holding back emotion just behind her professionalism. "Are you Dorian Ellison?" He hesitated, then nodded once. "Yes, ma'am." She pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Someone left this for you, said you'd be coming through." He took it with a gloved hand, unfolded it slowly. It was a handwritten note, simple, no flourish. "I don't know your story, but you helped carry mine. My husband was Staff Sergeant Lennox Rafford. I saw what you did. My son saw it too. Thank you for treating him like he still mattered. You didn't speak, but we heard you." Janelle Rafford. He didn't move for a long time, didn't blink, didn't shift, just stood there with a note in his hand. Then he folded it gently and slid it into his jacket pocket, not like it was a letter, like it was something that needed to be carried. The gate agent, still nearby, looked unsure if she should say something else. Dorian finally spoke. "Did she leave a return address?" "No, sir." He nodded. "That's okay." She hesitated. "There's actually one more thing. I know this is out of the ordinary, but some of the staff and passengers wanted to do something." Dorian tilted his head. "What kind of something?" She looked over her shoulder, then stepped aside. What Dorian saw next made him pause for the first time in days. Near the main boarding lane, about 20 people were standing in a line. Airport workers, random passengers, a janitor still holding a mop handle. No signs, no speeches, just standing shoulder to shoulder, hats off, hands over hearts, and then silence. Someone gave a signal. Every one of them turned slightly in his direction and just stood. No applause, no music, just stillness, and it spread down the hall. People who hadn't even seen the video or known the story began to slow their pace. Some stopped walking, some took off hats, others placed hands on hearts simply because the moment asked for it. A child tugged at his mom's sleeve. "Why is everyone stopping?" She bent down and whispered, "Because that man did something for someone who couldn't do it for themselves." The whole terminal didn't clap, they didn't chant his name, they just stood. And Dorian, for the first time in a long while, felt it, not praise, not recognition, but understanding. But as Dorian finally boarded his flight and Settled into his seat, a voice came over the intercom, and it wasn't the usual welcome aboard. The plane hadn't even pushed back from the gate when the overhead speakers crackled to life. Most passengers were still settling in, stowing bags, adjusting armrests, scanning the exits without really seeing them. Then came a voice, not from the cockpit, from the front of the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," the flight attendant began, her voice a little shaky but steady enough to be heard, "before we depart, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge someone special on board." Dorian looked up, frowning slightly, not curious, just alert. The attendant continued, "Today we are honored to have with us a U.S. Army Tomb Guard Sergeant, Dorian Ellison, who recently completed the sacred duty of escorting one of our nation's fallen soldiers home." A ripple moved through the cabin. Some heads turned. A few passengers already knew who he was. Others were putting it together. For the first time, the attendant paused, then added, "He didn't ask for this recognition, but sometimes gratitude doesn't need permission." Dorian sat still. He didn't move, didn't wave, didn't smile. He wasn't built for that kind of spotlight, but something in his chest felt different now, like something had shifted. And then from the back of the plane came the sound of a single person clapping, just one, then another and another, until it wasn't a round of applause. It was a rhythm, slow, measured, like a salute in sound. Dorian looked out the window. He didn't want the focus, but in that moment he understood it wasn't about him. It was about Lennox Rafford. It was about every soldier who never got to come home. It was about the people watching, realizing, maybe for the first time, that some acts of service happen without cameras, without ceremony, without even thanks, and yet they happen anyway. He bowed his head, not low, just enough. The applause faded, the cabin grew quiet, and the plane took off back in Fresno. Janelle stood on the porch with her two sons. The wind was picking up somewhere out past the street. A neighbor's flag flapped against its pole. Brillin looked up at her. "Mom, is that man going to do it again? Escort another soldier?" Nodded. "He will." "Do they always walk alone like that?" "Sometimes," she said. "But not really, not when people are watching." The boy seemed to think about that. "Is it okay that we watched?" Janelle smiled. "It's more than okay. It's why he walked like that in the first place." At Arlington 2 weeks later, Dorian stood once more at the tomb of the unknown soldier. It was early. The sun wasn't even fully out. Mist hung over the stone. The world was quiet again. His shift began at the top of the hour, and with no audience, no video, no applause, he took 21 steps, paused, turned, took 21 more. Because some things aren't about being seen, they're about being right there. About honor, they're about remembering. This wasn't about one airport or one soldier or one moment. This was about knowing when to step in. It was about seeing the value of a person before you understand their role. It was about respecting what we don't always recognize, whether you wear a uniform or not, whether you speak up or just stand still. You have the power to show honor. You have the power to interrupt disrespect gently but firmly, because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stand still and stand up. If this story moved you, share it, not for views, not for clicks, but so someone else sees what respect looks like, so someone remembers, so we don't forget the ones who carried the weight quietly and the ones who stood beside them even when they didn't have